You guys know that it's 3 hours later in Tennessee than it is here? I got a call from Bruce early this morning let me know what the weather was like back there. You do not want to hear from Bruce that early in the morning.
He called all of us and we told him to call you.
He will tell you stuff you don't want to know. He did leave me with the pleasure of introducing this week's program. I'm not going into detail about our speaker's background. Bruce did that last week, so anything I tell you about him, and I'm sure he'll deal with it too, but anything I tell you would be redundant. The one thing, and what we're here about, is the book the gentleman has written. I've begun reading the book and recommend it to you. It satisfies an awful lot of the need for nonfiction, in that it deals with a great deal of fact, it thinks outside the box, it should provoke thought on the part of you because of on your part, because the subject matter is something that we all deal with as business people and educators on a daily basis. And much of it has to do with the economic future of the state of California. So without a great deal of further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Ruiz Evans, who is a Rotarian from Fresno, so we kept it in the family.
I thank you all for letting me come out speaking. I really appreciate it. I just wrote a book, California's Next Century. There's a sign there and a sign there. If you go to YouTube and you type in Marcus Ruiz Evans, I have a video with even more details. It has 700 hits, and it has some articles on the economy that are relevant to the book. So, what I like to do is I like to start off with some questions. So, how many of you feel that we're out of the recession right now and everything's going to be just fine? Hands? How many of you have heard that it might take another 5 to 15 years to get out of the recession? How many of you have heard the really scary hypothesis that America's hit a plateau and that we're never going to rise up again? We're just going to maintain this level all the way on out. Anybody heard that? Yeah. If you go to the YouTube video, Marcus Ruiz Evans, I have 3 articles, one from Business Week, Reuters, and NASDAQ. And by the way, how many of you heard the Texas Federal Reserve Board chairman this week said that the main strategy of the federal government to get us out of the recession, called qualitative easing, aka inflation, is not working? It's been 5 years, aka half a decade, and you have Federal Reserve people saying, where's the proof it's working? You've done it for 5 years. How many of you are aware that we're on our 3rd round of qualitative easing? And here's the scary part. Qualitative easing round 1, about 2008 to 2010, they did in yearly installments. Qualitative easing round 2, about 2010 to 2011, same thing. Qualitative easing round 3, that you are in right now, they changed it up. Federal Reserve said we're going to check month by month. You know what that means? They have so little faith in their strategy, they no longer can project out a year. They're checking monthly, aka we have a tube going into the patient, you, and the doctors are standing by second going, is this working? Don't take my word for it. YouTube, Marcus Ruiz Evans, 3 articles there. They came out in the last month and one from last year. So, I bring that up to say there is a real reason for Californians to be interested in looking into their own plan to get this state out of recession. But let me add on a few other reasons why you should care. How many of you are aware that California has the worst, I'm not going to name them in order, schools, roads, dams, levees, seaports, airports, federal buildings, and bridges in all 50 states in all of America, and it has had that as rated by the federal government for the last 2 decades? You have the worst of everything in all of America. It's been this way for decades. The federal government has known about it. Nothing's been done. Is everybody aware of them? How many of you are aware that the levee that goes right by Sacramento, the capital, about 3 million people live there, is rated worse than the levee over New Orleans by the federal government? And if it broke, would equal a similar level of catastrophe as Hurricane Katrina. Anybody aware of that? Federal government's known about that for over 10 years. The estimate is that 1 million people would move, a couple 100,000 people would lose their homes, and you'd have a couple thousand people who would die. Anybody aware of that? This is what I'm talking about. This comes into play. We have been milked as a state. We have put money into a federal pot. We do not get our fair share, and your quality of life has gone down. Everybody remember the 1970s? They used to call it the golden age. And then somewhere around the 1980s, 1990s, we stopped calling California the golden state. That's the exact same time period where roads, schools, dams, bridges, airports, levees, seaports, and whatever started falling. That's not a coincidence. You have the worst schools in America. Well, what are you going to get? Urban blight in the downtown areas and the worst gangs in America and the highest prison volume in America. It's all related. So, how many of you are aware that you pay about $120 billion in extra federal income taxes every single year that you get absolutely nothing for? Has anybody ever heard of this? So you pay federal income taxes. It's about $400 to $500 billion goes from California to the federal government. 3/4 of that, $300 to $400 billion, pays for things you need, Social Security, military, etc. Then there's about an extra $100 billion that the feds keep. They put that in grants, and it goes to pay for roads, dams, bridges, seaports, airports, schools, and levees in 35 other states. So I want to lay this out. You have the worst of everything for decades, and yet you pay $120 billion every single year to make sure that 35 other states continue to have all of these things better than you. By the way, all of this is documented in the book, and this has been out on the internet. Type in California worst schools, type in California red state welfare. It's been known. We just don't talk about this as Californians. Now I want to draw a line for you. This milking, as I call it, of extra federal tax revenue started in the 1980s. The loss of infrastructure of everything in California started in the 1980s. Coincidence? Things and everything in California get worse at the same time that you're having effectively one state budget of extra federal income taxes siphoned away.